We lived on the third floor of a block of flats, and when the Nazi party came around collecting all the Jews, my aunt who stayed with us looked out and saw what was going on. She couldn't do anything about my mother, who by that time was taken downstairs into the courtyard where they gathered all the Jewish women.
Why do you think the Jewish people were singled out for persecution?
It's really very difficult to understand even now what made the Germans, the Nazi party, and Hitler in particular, zero in on the Jews. Hitler, of course, was an animal. He felt that the Jews were not up to the standards of the German people, and he felt that the Jews had to be eliminated in order to create a higher society, a better society. It's 1941 when it all started. I was 4 years old, and from then on, life never really became anything like normal, and I had to go through various stages. And as a young boy, I don't think I really understood what was going on around me. However, I do think that it must have affected me. We lived on the third floor of a block of flats, and when the Nazi party came around collecting all the Jews, all the Jewish women, because by that time the Jewish men were taken away, they went from flat to flat. It's a 5-story block, and they went from flat to flat. So my aunt who stayed with us looked out and saw what was going on. She couldn't do anything about my mother, who by that time was taken downstairs into the courtyard where they gathered all the Jewish women. And she suddenly remembered that on the same floor there was a family, or at least a man, whom we knew and who were friends, non-Jewish, and he took a hell of a lot of a chance and said, "John, let's go." She grabbed me and rushed me across to this flat, just around the corridor, and begged this man to hide us. And of course, it could have gone either way. He could have said, "I'm sorry, what the hell do you expect me to do? I don't want to go to prison or get killed." But no, he has taken a chance, a huge chance. He took us in, he took us in, closed the main door, took us into a cupboard, shut us into the cupboard, said, "Shut up, don't say anything, keep quiet, see what we can do." Unfortunately, the Nazi party representatives didn't go into his flat because he was non-Jewish. They knew that, because they knew everybody who lived in those places. Amazing the research they have done. And so we stayed in this cupboard, I don't know how long, maybe an hour. It felt much more. It felt like a lifetime. You can imagine how I must have felt, disorientated, frightened, not really understanding what was going on while my mother was taken away. The ghetto is a huge area. It was just behind the Budapest synagogue, which is the second largest in the world after the one in New York. And the choice was, if you don't stay in the ghetto, then you go to a concentration camp or you get shot. As I said, they were cramming us in as much as possible. It didn't matter whether it was comfortable or not. It was a very strange way of keeping Jews together without able to do anything. You couldn't, there was no radios, no telephones, no entertainment, no nothing. All you could do is talk to the 20 people around you. But you couldn't go out, because if you went out, you never know what happened to you. You could have been killed, or you could have caught the disease, dysentery, typhus. Typhoid was one of the biggest problems. There was no medication, food was nothing. You survived on hardly anything. So the situation was dire.
How long were you in the ghetto for?
Oh, it was several months. Some people stayed there longer. We stayed there for about 3 or 4 months. And if you imagine, we did not know that the ghetto was mined, ready to be exploded by the Germans, so that all of us in the 290 building would be blown up and die. Fortunately for us, unfortunately for the Germans, they did not have time because they had to retreat so fast because of the Soviet army coming in so quickly that they didn't have time to blow us up. So, if you like, we were very lucky. When the Russians came in, everybody thought this is wonderful. We have freedom at last. But of course, the Russians were simply there to annex Hungary as a satellite country to be part of the Soviet Empire. And that was their aim, and that's what they achieved. And that's why they would not tolerate any opposition. We realized sooner or later that this is a life which any young, intelligent student, or indeed adult, could not live with. The spies were everywhere. Neighbors were spying on neighbors. You have no freedom of the press. You have no freedom of talking, no freedom of the newspapers, no freedom on the radio. So you were living in an occupied country, effectively.
And now moving ahead to the uprising in Parliament Square, would you be able to expand a little bit on your memories of that?
Our flat was 5 minutes walk away from Parliament Square. And we found out from friends that there will be this demonstration. And I said, okay, well, 2 or 3 of us said, let's go and see what this is about. Maybe this is going to be a new life starting. So we just walk around the corner, effectively, which is surrounded by big buildings and the Houses of Parliament. It's a big square. As I said, there are 20,000, I can't remember how many people I said, 200,000 people were at the square. And the whole idea was that this was orchestrated by the students, but not only the students, asking for a new regime, for the new government, for the new prime minister, to make life better for the Hungarian citizens. Obviously, nobody realized that none of this can possibly happen under a strict Soviet regime, even though the Soviets retreated, making us feel as if we have freedom. But in fact, what happened was that they surrounded the square with tanks. They were stationed on the tops of blocks of flats, and they were just waiting for the signal. And when, I don't know why, I said to my friends, right, we've been here, we've seen it, I'm not really feeling comfortable, let's go. And we walked back home, and when we arrived in our flat, we could hear the gunshots. So I was very lucky to survive. As far as I know, around 300 people were gunned down. There are different reports, different people have different stories. It doesn't matter how many people, whether it's 300, 400, it was a massacre. And that way the Soviets proved that they mean business and nobody is going to stand up against them. Can you imagine when next day I went down and saw the blood and the clothes on the square, which wasn't cleared at that stage. It's not a very pleasant sight. If you think about it, this is the second time I have been very lucky. The first time when the ghetto wasn't blown up, and now the second time when I, for some reason, didn't stay in the square.
What made you decide to escape Hungary?
A friend of mine with whom we eventually escaped sat down and we said, look, is this life going to be what we want? Or is it worth taking a chance, whatever that chance is, and try to escape? Now, you couldn't just take luggage with you or a case, because the bridges were manned by army or police. And if they see you carrying anything like that, they say, what are you doing? Where are you going? And that's all you need to be immediately imprisoned. So that's why all I could take with me was a bag of food and my teddy. And simply lock the door of the flat and forget that I lived there and leave everything behind. So we went over the bridge in the afternoon, just walking across, and stayed with a friend at a friend's house, a flat near the railway station, so that we could start our journey 7 o'clock in the morning. It was interesting because the train we took went towards Austria. Now, I had tickets because I worked on the railway, as did my friend, so we were able to present a genuine ticket to go on this journey. And we found out that the train stops about 10 kilometers or so before the border, and that was the stop we got off. And then we found that there were many, many other Hungarians doing the same. We were frightened because we knew that where we had to go was mined. There were tanks going around nearby. There were searchlights watching what's going on. And we had a vague idea of where we are going. But by that time, it must have been about 15 of us or so trying to escape towards the border. And then we suddenly found ourselves under a watchtower. Now, if that watchtower would have been manned, we would have been shot. And that was the third time that I was lucky, or we were lucky. That watchtower, for some reason, wasn't manned. And there was a bridge immediately under the watchtower, which is in fact at this village called Andau, and that's where we crossed over, where the Austrians waited for us and welcomed us.
When you were greeted by the Austrians, were you suspicious or were you immediately met with relief?
Absolutely no question of being suspicious. This was a huge relief. We knew that freedom is there waiting for us. We knew that we are in good hands. We knew that at last we have a chance to understand what freedom or life is really, what really is about. And I think as soon as we got across the Austrian border, we knew that we are safe, and the relief was enormous. In Vienna, we were looked after by the Red Cross. They gave us a daily amount, very small amount, just to live with. They allowed us to wander around, and nobody knew what happens next. And the rumor was that each embassy offered permits to go to their country. There are a limited number of permits, and the question then was, where do we go? And many people said, oh, well, go to Australia, it's wonderful, or South Africa. And then we said, well, do we really want to go that far away? I think Europe is where I want to stay. I don't think I want to do that. Would I want to go to a non-English speaking country? And the answer was, again, no. I already learned a little bit of English, so I would have to stay in a country where English is spoken. So that really meant that England was the right answer.
Do you have any ideas about what allows people to treat other people in such terrible ways?
Well, it's all the same, really, isn't it? Whether it was the Nazis, whether it's the Chinese, whether it's what's happening in Asia, or what the Russians are doing, for example. It's all politics, it's all grabbing power, and there will always be people like that, and there will always be situations which are just repeating. History repeats itself, and unfortunately there's very little one can do other than try to educate. And this education is the word which I would use when I talk to schools. I am very lucky to be here to talk to you, and I just hope that this is just one step in the right direction.
There was a witch doctor who had laid this child down, put herbs all around her body, and was about to cut her before the security guard found her and rescued her and brought her to this baby's home where I was working.